Alice West Milwaukee School District, which was 10,000 students, about 10,000 students for 20 years of my career. I was a teacher, an instructional coach, a district administrator, and this past year I've transitioned out of the district and I'm doing work around learner profiles and just personalizing learning, learner-centric, learner-focused instructional practices. So it's really at the heart of how do we do this in our classrooms and in our schools to really get the pieces that we need. In addition to that work, I also work for CISA 1 in our state. I'm the accountability trainer for that area. So that means I take our state report card and I support districts understanding their state report card, figuring out what to do with that. So I'll show you a little bit in here some of the things we focus on in our state report card and how the learner profile addresses that, but it goes way beyond the things that our state is looking for accountability right now, okay? So we will get started. So on your table, I have a little four square chart. Looks like this. If you need more, I can give you one. We're gonna just start by defining in this top quadrant right here, what does success mean for your students? So how do you know if they've been successful? How would you define that? And this is just a jot your ideas down. We're gonna come back to it several times. So the key words here are success and for students. How do you determine success for the students? Be sure to jot your ideas down because you're going to be coding this as we go through. So you're going to be marking it up, adding ideas. So it gets to be an interesting one too, because if you're at the state level, success is defined maybe a little bit differently than at the district or the school or the classroom level. So enter it with your own lens. Where are you entering this conversation and how do you define success? Okay, in the quadrant right below that, we're going to change the question up a little bit. What does success mean for your students as human beings? So what's a successful human being? Put that in the bottom quadrant, right under the one you just did. About 30 seconds left. We're going to build on this as we go. All right, here's what I want you to do. With your table right now, I want you to look at that first quadrant. Talk to your table group. If you all generally have the same ideas in common, I want you to star yours. So you're going to turn and talk here in a second. If you have something that's different than anybody else at your table, I want you to circle it, okay? You're going to do the same thing with that bottom group. Anything that's similar to your table group, put a star by it. Anything that's really different, your idea is very different than what other people at your table said, circle it, okay? Go ahead, you have 2 minutes to do that.
Willing to learn and persevere. So I made it kind of self-awareness.
You know, just on the basic level, we're just talking about success of students, just what is in the teacher. I mean, at elementary level, that's,
Yeah.
you know, that's success for a student.
Wrap up your conversations.
I also put the ability to communicate.
So, in the state of Wisconsin, schools and districts get a state report card that have things similar to this. So, success is determined by student achievement, levels of knowledge and skills attained in reading and math. Those are the two that are measured. Student growth, so we look for closing those gaps, taking a look at our cell groups. Are we making enough growth in those areas? That's how we determine success. We talk about closing the gaps. On track to graduation. So when kids come in as a kindergartner, they enter in a cohort. And we try to keep them in that cohort so that they graduate on time with their peers, right? Okay? We talk about engagement, but these are the measures for engagement. Are they coming to school? Participation. That's test participation. Did they take our state tests? Not the participation that maybe we would be thinking of, right? And then completion, so graduation rates, okay? Taking a look at your top quadrant, what things did you have that were different than the things you might see up here? Anybody have any other? Students are successful when ideas? Shout them out.
When they can transfer knowledge from one subject to another or from one concept to another.
Now you're talking about DOK 3 and 4, right? You're talking about that really deep kind of thinking, okay? Other ideas? That's more performance-based kind of learning.
Ownership and independence.
That's a tough one to measure though, right? Especially when our accountability typically is around our state assessments and those kinds of pieces. Awesome. Anything else? So I want you to think about how well are students engaged in learning? How do you really determine that? And is the fact, when we're talking about everything I've heard in the last 2 days is about flexibility in time and place and pace and all of those things, right? How do some of these fit into what you've been hearing today? Just turn and talk quickly. I know, it's really tiring, right? and it's dark in here. conversation. I don't know if you've looked at the data quality campaign's work or not, but they really define data in these categories. Academic data, so that's the growth, the kinds of courses kids are taking, enrollments, grades, completion, graduation, those kinds of things. Testing data, including quizzes, tests, interim, annual assessments. Demographic, who do we have that we're working with, right? Important one. They define actions as the attendance, the behaviors, extracurricular activities. Are they engaged in other things in the school rather than just coming to school? Program participation, the observational data, and then homework. So I want you to take a look at what you said you valued right now. And if you're using this criteria, how would you evaluate that? So which data do you collect right now that you can actually measure the things you said are important for a student and important for a human being? Do you have tools currently in place to measure the things you value? Take a look at your list. Just a quick minute to peruse that. Feel free to talk with your partners too. The actions were the behaviors, like coming to school on time and, yeah. So do you have data? Do you have a way to collect the data on those habits of mind pieces?
We've started a way in our, we do mentoring or advisory.
Okay.
And so the students reflect on their habits of work and learning, and we will use live school to give points based on those habits of work and learning.
Okay. Teacher gives those points? Students, peers, parents, who gives those?
Anybody in the building, the teacher,
That observes it?
administrator, our custodians, our lunch ladies, everybody can.
Cool. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's layer on some thinking here. So this is a statement from Nicole, June 2016. Timely, meaningful data and the ability to act upon the data are essential to enabling students and educators to make informed judgments about what students have learned. Think about that for a second. How are you determining what students have learned? How well they've learned it? I think that's a big conversation we've been having these last 2 days, right? It's the mastery. It's showing proficiencies or meeting competencies. So it's not just about checking the box. It's how well have they learned it? What do they need to learn next? Then it goes on to say how the student learns best. So do we have information about how the students actually learn best? How they feel like they learn best, how they've been observed on how they learn best, their preferred modes, their preferred learning styles. Do we have data on what the students are interested in? I've heard a lot about advisory groups and mentoring and things like that. Huge place where that happens around here. We find out what the students are interested in. Think about how that data is captured. How do you collect that data? That's data about students. What they're interested in their preferred learning styles and modes, that's data. That's not necessarily honored anywhere else. So how are you collecting that and recording that? Because those things are going to change with students as they grow. And those are huge iterations that you want to capture within that student. And then I've heard about this one this week too, how students are going to demonstrate his or her learning. Well, they have to know what engages them, what motivates them to want to be involved, what my depth of knowledge level is I'm trying to attain with this, and then what kind of demonstrations match all of that. That is a complex thing. And it's such an easy question to ask students. How do you want to show me you know that? It sounds so simple, but there's so much complexity within there. I've also heard a lot about the multiple pathways to meet standards. So take a look at what you have on that right side or that left side again. And I want you to take a look at this and say, so how do we gather data on learning styles, preferred learning modes, interests, and all of those other pieces that we just talked about? Do you have measures in place? And just jot them down. What are they? 1 minute. You can jot that on the right side. What data supports, what do you have that supports that?
Question about supporting that question.
So the academic data pieces, those are all tracked pretty well. The rest of the things we're going to talk about today are what we track through that learner profile. And we're going to talk about how to grow that learner profile, how to develop that learner profile. I can give you some examples. I can tell you I've done it with papers in a binder. We've had Google Docs set up where every student has a Google folder. We've tried it with Google Classroom where the students have a folder that they put things in. I've worked with a learning relationship management system, which is an online platform to do this work. I've worked with a lot of different ways to collect this learner profile. Doesn't matter what tool you use to collect it. It's about that you collect it and you do something with it on a regular basis. So I can tell you when we first started 7 years ago, teachers did their profiles. We had data on multiple intelligences, learning styles, interests, all their favorite things, all this stuff. And then we put it in the binder and it sat there until it was time to update it. And then we pulled it out and we did it all again, put it in that binder, set it up there, until it was time to update it, right? So we knew it was important, we valued it, we didn't know how to do anything with it. So it was the first iteration, right? And that was the first step. We got something done. And I always joke with people, I'm like, just put something down, we'll work from there, but if you don't get started at all, we're not gonna have anywhere to go. So that was great. We realized after year 1, we didn't really know our kids any better, and certainly the kids didn't know themselves any better. It was simply a checklist, a task list that they had to do. So, number 1, the reason we do a learner profile is not for the teachers. The reason we do it is so that the students have a really rich understanding of themselves. The learner profile is about the student. That's it. Gives us as teachers that dip in to a little secret information about the students that we can utilize and capitalize on and build on and all of those things. But it's not about us. So the fact that we collected it, we put it in those binders and we put it up on our shelf, we didn't even get them to engage with it. We didn't even get them to use it anymore. So learner profile, first and foremost, creates a rich understanding of self, who the student is, who they were, and who they may become. And you'll hear me say that over and over again. The next thing a learner profile does is, oh, that's it right there, represents who they were. So who was I? So when I talked about that, you've got to update it over and over and over and over again. Think about that. The littlest learners every day have a new favorite thing, right? They've got a new hobby, a new interest. They're so inquisitive and they're changing all the time, all the time, all the time. You got to capture that. You got to build upon that. And then you start looking for some connections between those things to help them figure out, what do they really value? What do they really like to do? The older the students get, the less they're willing to share. They don't necessarily want to share that out. But if it becomes their nature and their habit to always think about, yeah, what do I like right now? What are my favorite things beyond just the surface level? And we grow that in them, that self-reflection, it's going to just continue. Helps learners evolve from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. That idea that I'm continually changing, I'm continually growing. I am becoming a more complex person with every experience that I gain. I am growing. Every time I have an interaction with a person, with something in the community, a learning experience, an activity, whatever, I am continually growing. So we ask our students to, when they complete something on their learning path, reflect on it. How have you grown as a learner? Every time they want to change one of their skills or dispositions or their favorite thing, we have them reflect. Why is that different in you now? And we show that you're continually growing and evolving. And this is a really important one. And this is where I think I differ from maybe a little bit, if I understood the advisories, some of them that I've talked to people about, is this one is created, maintained, and owned by the learner. So it's not a set time you go, fill out your profile, something like that. We really make that embedded in everything they do. So every learning experience, you pull out your profile and you figure out what strengths I'm going to bring to this learning experience. Oh, these are struggles within me. It's going to be really hard. I don't like to work in a group. I see this as a group project. This is going to be a rough thing for me. What am I going to do to overcome that to be successful here? So again, it's not something that's done to them. Now, when I say that, of course they need to learn how to do it. Of course you're going to have to model. Of course you're going to have to coach them. Of course. But in the end, everything appears as though the student is driving that, and you're supporting and guiding along the way. I can tell you, we have 4-year-olds doing this. So our 4-year-olds are reflecting on, and our 5-year-olds are reflecting on this. They're the easier ones than our high school ones sometimes. Our high school students are much harder to get involved in this kind of a reflection upon themselves. And you know what, every time that comes up, I always just go back to the teachers and say, we created that learner right there. Our 4, 5, 1-year-old first graders are so excited to talk about themselves and share about themselves. What have we done that's changed that mindset along the way to where that part is not happening anymore? And what do we need to do different along that way? So every time I hear that, that statement of, the little ones are too little, or the older ones just don't want to do it. No, we've got to work through that. So let's talk about the elements of a profile. Here are the ones that I work with most. Doesn't really matter what you have, what you call them, how you capture them, but these are the elements that we focus on. So we're looking for things that are going to tell us who the students were. Academics is a big part of it. What have you done academically? What have you achieved so far? But it goes way beyond that. Who they were, who they are not right now, and who they might become. It creates transparency for powerful relationships. And the real big goal, and I heard this all through the mentoring and advisory sessions that I sat through, is it's about those relationships and that network. Who are my people? When I am stuck in a situation, who are my people I'm going to go to? That's what we work on creating. First and foremost, though, it creates the relationship of the learner to self. Who am I? What do I bring to this? What am I really good at? What are my struggles? What are my goals? What do I want to do with my life? So that learner to self relationship is what the learner profile does first and foremost. Learner to educator makes it super transparent. Learner to learner, because we do a whole lot of background building before we ever have them write or record anything in their profile. We do tons of activities like me. So I like it when we do activities in the classroom and I'm up moving around. Stand up if that's like you. And then the kids will stand up. The older ones, we put the emoticons on the wall and we have them go stand by the emoticon of like the hearty face or the thumbs up or the squinty eyes or any of those. The older kids love that kind of a thing. So they learn about each other too. That helps in our relationship of our classroom, because when you start talking about learning preferences and environmental preferences, I like to work, well, my husband and I are a huge example of this. I like to be on the floor, spread out everything. My husband likes to be at a table, no background noise, quiet, the whole thing. His work style is so different than mine at our house. I like the TV blaring. I'm probably baking muffins and doing laundry and goodness knows what else while I'm working. Our styles are so different. Had a little marital strife and we had to work through that. So if we would have had maybe learner profiles and we would have started, we would have been better off. But as kids go through that and they start to realize, wow, you really like it quiet. I get it. So every time I'm coming over and I'm talking to you and you're getting angry at me, it's not really that you're angry at me, it's that I'm interrupting your workflow. And they understand those kinds of things. So it creates the culture and the environment for students too. So that learner-to-learner relationship happens because they understand what each other needs to be successful. And then the learner to others. Here are the elements that we use. So strengths and struggles. Can be any list that you want for strengths and struggles. It's what students feel like. We like to create that with the content subject in mind. So in math, what are key elements in math? And not fractions and decimals and things like that, but is it a strength when you have things presented visually to you? Or with manipulatives, or what helps you with those things? And what makes it more of a struggle? We have a group of students right now. I didn't mention that I spend about 50% of my time working with an alternative high school. And the students are placed there. Don't have the most engaged audience, I can tell you, when we go in there. They will tell us every single thing that they don't like about everything that we're doing. Pretty openly, right? I was joking the other day that I had a conversation and I said, after I Urban Dictionary what you just said, we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about this. So I get a little colorful language, things like that. But I love it because I also say to them, wow, you're really exerting your student agency here. You are really letting me know how we're not meeting your needs. Awesome. What are we going to do about it, right? So as soon as we open up that barrier and start talking about those things, some of these other things will come in. Hobbies and interests, careers. What are your career goals? What are you interested in? All of those things. Preferences is one of my favorites to talk about. This one is huge because it has a lot of elements into it. It's the environmental preferences we talked about, but it also has the motivational preferences. So little ones typically like to be called out in front of their peers of just doing something great, right? They like that acknowledgement. You get into those middle grades, and as soon as you start calling them out that they did something, whoa, hold on, I don't want to be different than my peers. Don't call me out. And then we'll see some reverse behaviors that actually are negative, even though I just gave you a compliment for something really positive, right? So their motivation, the way they're motivated, is not by peer public recognition. I have to figure out how to motivate them in a different way, how to acknowledge them in a different way that's based on their motivational preference. Who motivates them in your school? What relationship is a motivator? So motivations are not something I can ever do to them. I have to figure out what motivates that student, and I have to adjust to that. Bringing in external motivators is one thing, but the bottom line is that's just a compliance. That's just me coercing the situation to try to get them to do what I want. Figuring out what their true motivations are and capitalizing on those is what we really try to go for here. Behaviors. That is one of those, this is one where we actually spend a lot of time on, because we talk about what does it mean to be an independent learner? What does it mean to make learning personal for yourself? So when we talk about behaviors, those are the behaviors we're focusing on. Not the behaviors of you can't do this, you can't run in the hallway, you can't talk when the teacher's talking. Those are not the behaviors we're looking at here. We're looking at how are we talking to the students and helping them understand what those employability skills are, citizenship skills, those kinds of pieces that we can mold into those behaviors. Skills and dispositions is the same one, same idea there. One of the schools I'm working with right now, they use 4 dimensions. So academic, employability, citizenship, and personal wellness. And all those dispositions are really aligned there. So one thing I would suggest or challenge you to do is go back and look at your school or district's mission, vision, and beliefs. Pull out all the words that are skills and dispositions, and then have a great conversation about what does that mean, either in our classroom, in our school, or in our district. One of my favorite things to do, and I'll put that resource in that folder, it's not in there right now, but one of my favorite things to do is take a disposition, like collaboration or something like that, and bring a K-12 group together that's in a district and say, what does that look like at every level? What does it look like for a kindergarten, first, second grader, 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th, 9th through 12th? What does it look like in your core subjects, so our high schools? What does that look like in math? What would we see? Or ELA, or gym, the cafeteria, some of those things. So that when you're talking about those dispositions, you have a clear understanding, district-wide, school-wide, whatever your scope is, that knows how that's growing and developing. And then, of course, there's the assessment scores, and then that history. Because if you're not capturing the iterations, you're not going to show how that student has grown. So, I'm going to give you a moment here to chat. So these are the things that we want to capture beyond just academics. I've got academics in there. These are the kinds of things we want to capture. I want you to look at the SMART goal, and we've changed the wording just a smidgen on the SMART goal. So specific, measurable. We use the word abilities here. What strengths do I have within myself to achieve that goal? Or we use resources. What are my resources? And then we get to the global and community impact at the bottom, okay? So at your table, what I want you to do is spend about 2 minutes or so, 3 minutes or so, and I want you to talk about which of these ideas support each of these steps within the SMART goal. I would even encourage you to turn your paper over, write the SMART beside it, and figure out the other parts of the learner profile. Where does that fit in? And then we're going to share out together. Okay? 2 minutes. Go ahead.
and
Yes.
find out where would we get them from up here?
Yep. So if you, for example, my abilities, if I know my strengths and struggles, that's going to help me understand the abilities I'm either bringing to the learning experience or what's going to be a barrier to my learning
So
experience.
the abilities would come from the learner profile where they talk about who they are and what they are.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep. So, yep. So it would come from the strengths and struggles. It would come from my learner dispositions, my skills and dispositions that I know about
Oh, the
myself.
stuff in the gray.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's the about me piece.
Yes. You can't read it? So mental note, I have to write that in black next time.
So a bigger idea will be okay.
Yeah, that's
The
fine.
idea of what we're talking
Absolutely. Because yours are not going to be exactly like that when you do this at your school. So. How are you guys doing?
Well, if I understand what you're asking us to do is see which ones on the left contribute to the two on the right. So
Yes.
that's what we were just kind of talking about. We were still unspecific. Or, yeah.
So specific you add, I could,
We thought the interests, our preferences, I mean, would be an obvious. Or I did, anyway, I thought preferences would be obvious. You said, I don't know what you said, strengths. Did you say strengths and struggles?
Yeah.
Or resources?
Who can you ask for help and materials? Yeah. I would say preferences would go with your resources because there are people that you are drawn to or you come into with your life.
so there's that. There's the environmental. So what's my preference in environment and how's that going to support me? Hold on one second. Resources also goes into your preference of learning mode. So do you like to learn in an online environment? Do you like a face-to-face environment? Do you like collaborative or a one-on-one? So my preferred, that could be a resource too.
Something that fits into a traditional high school.
So you guys are all high school?
We're all from the same school.
All from the same school. Do you guys currently do like academic and career planning and those?
To some extent.
Okay.
We have advisory periods that meet for half an hour twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we would normally do something like this. That we have graduate portfolios for them where we hit a lot of those things, not with the same labels and not all of them, but that's where we would track the kids all 4 years.
We're not looking at changing our entire school right now to this program. That's the kind of message I'm getting from the principal. It's more what can we do?
What can we add?
Innovative.
Very smart. Yeah.
We kind of get a start.
Very smart. Okay, if we could come back together. So a couple of things about this. I heard some really great conversations. And what people were really noticing was all of these things can be leveraged in multiple places over here. So again, key with the learner profile is it's not about what the teacher knows about the student, it's about what the student knows about the student. So when they set their goals, and by the way, we set goals for our core subjects or our project-based learning, things like that, on a regular, ongoing basis. So students may get new goals every week to 2 weeks. So they're not long goals. They're short, they're timely, And it really capitalizes on what the students know about themselves. One thing we were talking about was with this preference idea here is understanding preferred learning modes. Do I really like to, on first experience, learn it online through an adaptive platform, something like that? Or do I really like to have that human interaction? Somebody really showing, modeling, demonstrating. What's their preferred entry point to a lesson is huge. And with the students that we're working with right now, we have both. We have both. So we ask them, would you like to have a seminar first and then go work on the computer or do something like that? Or would you like to start out learning about it and come to me with questions? You get to the same goal, right? But what's their preferred entry point? So all important things there. So what I would encourage you to think about as you're moving forward, and it's time to wrap up here, but think about what you're currently doing, what data do you currently have, what do you value, and then what's missing? What do you need to layer in? And if you feel free, I can send you some samples of some different kinds of resources, things like that. But one thing I always talk about is when you leave, create your 5, 10, 20-day plan. In the next 5 days, which of those things are you going to learn more about? You, as the adult, what are you going to learn more about? In the next 10 days, what process do you have to put in place to allow that to happen? How are you going to start doing something different? And then you move into the, now what are we going to do? And if you don't do all three, give yourself the time to understand it deeply, figure out how it's going to happen, and then move to the what, you won't create a sustainable system that's going to be able to carry on. It's easy to add a learner profile in. People will do it. They'll put it on the shelf and leave it there. If you don't get the process of how you're going to keep it going, how you're really going to have the kids looking at it on a daily basis and thinking about how it reflects them and how they're going to use what they know about themselves to move their learning forward, you just wasted your time creating that learner profile. So make it embedded in the process of how they understand themselves better as learners. Take the time to do that. Okay? I'm happy to send you some examples of resources, things like that. I do have, I'll drop a couple more things in that folder that's on the website now that we've talked a little bit. But you can find some things in the iNav. And then that's my contact information. Okay? Thank you guys for sticking to the end of the conference. It's a dark room and it's been a long 2 days, so thank you.